建交70周年之际访华，他说
But this is not about the 70 years behind us. It's really about thinking ahead.
首次乘坐中国高铁，他说
It's fast, so it's impressive, and also the opportunity to see an important part of China.
推动能源转型与绿色合作，他说
Since China is leading on many of these technologies, I believe we need to cooperate on them.
高端访谈专访挪威首相斯特勒，敬请收看。
关注国际焦点，洞察世界风云。大家好，欢迎来到本期的高端访谈，我是邹韵。今天我们来到了北京南站，即将在这里登上开往上海的高15次列车。我们将在这趟高铁旅程当中采访本期节目的嘉宾——挪威首相斯特勒。就任首相之后首次访华，他重点关注哪些合作议题？今年是中挪建交70周年，他对于两国关系的发展有怎样的期待？对于这一次为期3天的访华之旅，又有哪些感受呢？今天我们就一块在旅程当中寻找答案。Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us on Leaders Talk with such a unique and special setup here on a bullet train. And I'm just wondering, is this your first time to take on China's high-speed rail? And how do you feel about trip so far?
It's a very special setting, I must say, but it's a telling setting because it gives me the opportunity to go from Beijing to Shanghai, and you can work and read and sleep and relax, and
Yes.
it's fast. So it's impressive, and also the opportunity to see an important part of China.
Actually, besides being fast, being comfortable, this is also very environmentally friendly. For instance, in terms of emission, this is only about 6% of those of airplane and about 11% of that of cars. So it's very environmentally friendly.
And I understand that China is already considering moving even faster on trains, I've heard. So
That's right.
But when you can move with train when there are large population concentrations, it's a very good option.
It is.
And I think it's a good example.
That's right. Well, Mr. Prime Minister, this is your very first official visit to China since taking office. So can you share with us a little bit about the key takeaways so far, and what are some of the outcomes that you hope to achieve?
Well, I believe that countries should talk to each other, should have connection, should have trade, should have an open dialogue where they differ and where they agree. China and Norway have had diplomatic relations now for almost 70 years. On the 5th of October, it will be 70 years
That's
since
right.
those were concluded. But this is not about the 70 years behind us. It's really about thinking ahead. So the purpose of my visit has been to update Chinese-Norwegian relations. I have brought a small but very representative business delegation of
That's right.
companies with leading skills. There have been issues now on the global agenda that I believe countries like Norway and China should discuss. We've been through the pandemic, we've been through economic turbulence, and we now have, on my continent in Europe, a full-fledged war in Ukraine. You have the Middle East, so countries need to come together and discuss. And then, Norway and China have different cultures, different political models, and I think it's good to share experiences there, and there may be issues where we have different views. And I like to take them directly and not hide them away. And I appreciate the opportunities I've had with the Chinese leadership. So for that part of the Beijing part of the visit, it has been very successful.
And now you're heading to Shanghai on this train. What are some of the plans they're going to have in Shanghai? I heard you're going to take a cruise, a night cruise on the Huangpu River. That's going to be
That's
beautiful.
tomorrow. But even going to Shanghai is worthwhile in itself, because I would like to spend one extra day to see also the coast and to make this travel. Norway is a major seafood exporter to China, so we will have some presentation of that in Shanghai. I will also go outside Shanghai to witness completion of a major ship by a Chinese shipyard, where some of the Norwegian ship owners have commissioned the largest car carriers that can be built. And they are now being built in a more economic and environmental friendly way with better fuel. So I'll be present at that. I will also go to Fudan University.
Yes, you're going to have engagement and dialogue with students there.
Lecture with students. I enjoy that.
挪威位于北欧斯堪的纳维亚半岛西部，东邻瑞典，东北与芬兰和俄罗斯接壤，南边同丹麦隔海相望，西濒挪威海。挪威是最早承认新中国的西方国家之一。9月9日，挪威首相斯特勒抵达北京，开启了为期3天的访华之旅。当天，习近平主席在与斯特勒会见时指出，中挪建交70年来，两国人民相互尊重、相互欣赏、相互学习，结下了宝贵友谊。访华的第1天，斯特勒还游故宫、逛簋街，专门体验了北京的历史传统与文化风情。
Jeg kan du tro det. Nå er vi altså i en forbudte by. Partiet det er utrolig fascinerende. Det er jo ganske symmetri her mellom
9月9日当晚，斯特勒来到位于北京市通州区的北京城市图书馆，出席中挪建交70周年招待会。这栋兼顾环保理念与审美巧思的建筑，由中挪两国建筑师合作设计，已经成为北京的新地标和热门网红打卡地。
Library to the shipyard, from the books to the steel. There is a lot we can achieve together. We are ambitious for the next 70 years.
Just as you mentioned that you had a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping yesterday, and during the meeting, some of the very important issues were touched upon, for instance, the bilateral relations, and also about how to make joint efforts in addressing some of the major challenges. So from your perspective, what are some of the most impressive part about this meeting?
Well, first, I'm happy to be able, with the Chinese leadership, to confirm some of the areas where we now work together. Green transition. We have concluded an agreement on climate change mitigation, technological cooperation on the green transition. The Chinese side have been giving a 15-day visa waiver to Norway, which is helpful for our travelers, business people. So we have been updating and taking stock of our bilateral trade relations. And then we touched also on the global issues of our time, because if we're going to deal with climate change, if we're going to create regulations for artificial intelligence, we need cooperation. And of course, China, becoming the biggest economy in the world, needs to hear from Norway that, we encourage cooperation with the US, with the European Union, with all the major players, with India, on this issue.
Well, Mr. Prime Minister, it seems that since taking office, you're very determined in making Norway one of the leaders in climate change initiatives and in creating a low-carbon future. But as we all know, that Norway is one of the largest exporters in oil and gas, and the output has been expanding in recent years. So what is your government's plan to balance this while with the commitment of cutting 55% by 2030?
Well, it's a good question, and I believe, we may say, is this a dilemma? And I may answer, I think it is the world's dilemma, because we come from a fossil economy, and we need to transit into a renewable economy. This is Norway's story. Energy in Norway does not come from oil and gas. It comes from hydro water resources.
That's right.
We discovered oil and gas in the North Sea in 1970, about that year. And we have been, an exporter since. But we are now transiting into the renewable age. We want to produce our gas without emissions, and that is why we are also investing in the capture of the CO2 and the storage safely under the seabed. And we venture now into new technologies such as solar panels, such as onshore wind, as you have in China, but also offshore wind. And that will be our next phase. So we will have to use part of the revenues we've had from oil and gas to make the transition into renewable energies. And this is part of our agenda with China.
That's right. As you mentioned, China is also making great strides in green and sustainable development with dual climate goals.
Yeah.
One of them is to peak carbon emission by 2030, and the other one is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. So how do you think, or in what way do you think both countries can collaborate more efficiently to spur this climate initiatives?
Well, first of all, each country has to fulfill its obligations. And it's hard, it's a transition that needs to be stimulated and pushed and, really brought forward. And we will aim for carbon neutrality by 2050. We will cut our emissions by 55% by 2030 together with the European Union. Now, since China is leading on many of these technologies, I believe, we need to cooperate on them. I know that China is making major steps on electric vehicles. Norway is currently, new sales of cars in Norway is at 90% electric vehicles.
It's the highest adoption rate around the world.
It is. And this is a result of many years of work to get there. Then we get another challenge, and that is as we electrify and move away from coal, oil and gas, we need new sources of electricity because we need more electricity for a growing economy and for a growing world population. And that's why I think Norway and China can work together on some of these renewables. The way you build ships. For example, the ship I'm going to see tomorrow can sail with much lower energy consumption.
And emission.
And part of the technology they use in these ships is Norwegian technology. So here you see a win-win.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the Chinese NEVs, as you may know, that in the coming weeks, the EU countries are going to decide whether to impose tariffs on Chinese NEVs. And Norway is not joining EU on that. And a senior official from your government has said that the introduction of tariffs is neither relevant nor desirable for your country. So can you share with us a little bit about the rationale behind such a decision and why it's not desirable?
Well, as you know, Norway is not a member of the European Union.
That's right.
But we are closely associated with an agreement with the European market. So we are not part of the European Union's trade policy. So that's one reason why we are not part of this. Secondly, I think, in general, one should not wish to have any of these kind of tariffs because they are punitive tariffs and they often trigger retaliation and we all stand back losing from it. We don't produce cars. We are not part of this trade policy. And I don't want to put an extra burden on Norwegian consumers. They should have access to
all cars.
To cars that they wish to buy.
And also we know that China is one of Norway's largest trading partner in Asia. And you have previously said that trade with China is of great importance for Norwegian jobs, the value creation, etc. So what is your vision in writing a new chapter or at least expanding the cooperation on the economic and trade front?
So again, there are many companies in Norway trading with China. I did not want to bring a huge delegation, but a smaller delegation of very representative companies. So here you have, for example, Yara, which is the world's leading producer of fertilizer. You have Kongsberg Maritime, which is one of the leading technological companies of Norway, providing equipment for modern ships. So they have to work with their partners to find opportunities. Most of the companies in Norway, they live from export and also from import. So, of course, China, as a growing economy, our largest partner in Asia, I wish to see safe and secure collaboration.
What are some of the specific areas that now you see the greatest potential and opportunities, as you have mentioned?
Well, if you spell Norway, you talk about coast, ocean, maritime nation. My country has the second largest coastline in the world.
I've been there once, yes, it's beautiful.
So it's, it's beautiful, but it's pretty long.
It is also very resourceful.
It means that a large part of our business community, our business opportunities stem from the coast, from the ocean. So I think this is a prime source. For example, now coming to Shanghai, I will go and visit Norwegian actors who do export of fish. Salmon is a very important product now coming to China with, providing Chinese consumers with salmon.
And also, as you mentioned, that this year marks the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two countries. And it seems the current relations are growing on a sound track. And as you said, both yesterday and just now in the interview, that you're here not just to look back this friendship, you're here to look forward. So what is your vision in expanding the depth and breadth of cooperation between the two sides?
I wish to see trade. I wish to see especially that we support them into these green technologies, the green transition. I wish to see students that can exchange and that we can also meet at the big international venues where we need to find common solutions together. Again, China is a big country, Norway is a smaller country. We are this year a partner country at the G20.
Yes.
So when President Lula hosts the G20 in Rio in November, so we will have an opportunity there to work as Norway with some of these major players.
As you mentioned earlier, that Norway is not a full member of EU, but you've said before that Norway is an EU insider on the outside. What do you really mean by that?
Very good expression here, you found that.
And what is your long-term goal for positioning a country on the global stage?
Well, you know, we've had 2 referendums about joining the European Union, and both ended up 52-48 against, and that we have to respect. But you know, most of our trade is with the European Union. So it's in my interest to have a good relationship, a trusted relationship, and in that sense to be on the inside. And then beyond this market, you know, these are our neighbors, Nordic neighbors, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. These are our European partners. So on a number of other issues linked to security and research and all of the other issues beyond trade, these are our closest friends. So that's why I say, you know, I'm very much on the inside, although I'm a member from the outside.
Mr. Prime Minister, you are known for your commitment to dialogue, communication, and multilateralism. Given the world is now faced with some of the major geopolitical risks and challenges, how do you envision positioning or leveraging the position of Norway to facilitate dialogue to address some of those most pressing issues?
Well, you know, Norway does not have a size or a nature or a temperament to force anything on anybody. So we have to play our role as a responsible state, UN member, having active diplomatic relations with other countries to try to promote solutions that can bring peace and stability. You know, a small open country like mine will always suffer when there is insecurity, war and instability. And that's why precisely now I'm very concerned about the situation with the war in Ukraine. You know, it has a absolute meaningless number of casualties, of people being killed. Every day there is attack on infrastructure, hospitals, private buildings. It has to stop. And, you know, I hear from China that China is in favor of stability.
That's right.
Being against threat of nuclear weapons. And all these issues are threatened by this kind of war because it is escalation. What can Norway do? Well, we can tell to our Chinese friends that we as neighbors of Russia urge other countries to make what they can, do what they can to help this war end. And then, you know, securing peace, madam, is a long-term issue. You have to work on it day by day. And I believe that peace is not simply absence of war. Peace is about human development and human opportunity, that our children can, you know, educate, work, and live. So we have to work together in international cooperation, secure living conditions, that's the climate change agenda, fight poverty, provide renewable electricity to a growing population, but also stimulate, you know, education and research, which is forward-looking.
That's right. We can take a look outside. I think now maybe we just missed the sunset, but still it has its beauty. It is getting dark, but hopefully the outlet is getting brighter.
Very much so.
Very much so. Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping has also said during the meeting that the world is undergoing profound changes unseen in a century, and you actually has a similar assessment of the world situation, which in your word is that we are in the midst of changes and important shifts. So, Mr. Prime Minister, with that context in mind, how do you understand the significance of the 3 initiatives, the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative proposed by President Xi?
Well, I think they are worthwhile studying. We have all different ways of expressing our aspirations for the world. I think there's something recognizable about Chinese culture and tradition in the way President Xi expresses this. I hope it will be followed up, you know, with concrete actions on the international scenes in relations with other countries like mine.
2021年9月，约纳斯·加尔斯特勒作为工党主席赢得竞选，就任挪威首相。从政30多年间，他担任过挪威外交大臣、卫生大臣等职，并曾在国际组织任职。
So, Mr. Prime Minister, You entered politics in your 20s, kind of at an early age, and apart from studying political science in your college, also during your secondary school, the subject that you chose include social policy, Norwegian domestic policy, foreign policy, well, that's a lot of policy studies, and social economics. So what sparked your interest in politics at a very young age, and what inspired you to pursue a career in politics for all those years?
Well, I grew up in a family where there was discussion all the time around the table, dinner table. I had two elder sisters.
But you grew up in a more business-oriented family,
Yeah.
right? But you talk about politics all the time.
Yeah, my father worked, in shipping, so he traveled a lot and brought back impressions. And I had two elder sisters who had very strong opinions about their younger brother and about how things should be. So this was my interest, and I had the opportunity, and I see now the privilege to choose the education that I felt responded to me. Nobody directed me into a special track, but I didn't enter politics before I was 35. I was a civil servant, I was a diplomat and an advisor.
Yes.
So in a Norwegian setting, it came on really rather late, I would say.
Oh, you would call it that rather late.
Sometimes I would call that rather late. But the commitment and engagement and being prime minister is a privilege and a responsibility that I take seriously.
In May this year, Norway, together with Spain as well as Ireland, has officially recognized a Palestinian state. And you have officially revealed that this was your plan to do it together with other European countries. So how do you think this collective recognition, in what way it helps in promoting the peace or the peace process in this region?
Since the creation of the State of Israel, which Norway supported very actively, and we still do, there should have been also a path for the Palestinians to have their state. This has not happened. And we've, for the last 30 years, worked actively in Norway to support a peace process that could lead to agreement between Israel and Palestinians on creation of a peace and also a Palestinian state. The large majority of states have recognized the Palestinian state. But Norway was among the countries who said we would like to get there, but as part of a peace deal. There we changed our perspective because we now have a government in Israel that actively is not only not promoting negotiations for a two-state solution, but saying that that is excluded. They do not want to work for that. And that is the time where I believe we have to say we recognize a Palestinian state. So if you are a state, it's a serious business. You have to behave according to major international regulations and rules. And Palestinians should be given those rights and obligations. If we don't do that, it will be violence and terror that will speak. And that, I think, is wrong. There's a terrible war going on. Norway condemns the attack that hit Israel a year ago, a brutal attack on civilians. We defend Israel's right to defend itself, but the way this war has gone on is beyond what is acceptable according to international law and not least humanitarian. And then we have to look ahead. How can there be, peace and stability and security in this region? Because wars there are also dangerous for world stability beyond.
Well, Mr. Prime Minister, as we're about to approaching Shanghai, I know for your 3-day trip, it's very, very intensive, but also very diversified. So till this minute, what do you like about this country? Because you've been here a couple of times before in the 1990s, in 2000 or so. What do you like about the country? It's
a large country, and I'm fascinated about it. I've always been very fascinated by China's history. And by visiting the Forbidden City, you get a glimpse of this very long history.
That's right.
Which I think often, sometimes people in Europe look at countries here and now, but they forget that my country has a history, your country has a history, which we need to understand the present. So that's a lot of fascination. Beyond that, I would say I adore the food, I adore the hospitality, and right now I'd like to say I adore the train. I think the fact that you
Because of this interview, hopefully part of that. I'm kidding.
Meeting you, of course, yeah.
Thank you so much.
But the idea that I hear from my diplomats
based here in Beijing.
In Beijing, and I heard from the Prime Minister of China. Both of them said, if we go to Shanghai, we prefer to go by train. And I think, the instinct would be to say plane is faster. But this is as fast. It is very, expression of a modernity, which I think is speaking well of China.
Speaking of the modernity, how do you understand China's path towards modernization?
Well, this is also a large question. I think, in my lifetime, I'm born in 1960. And I think there is no country that has gone through such a profound change and transition as has China. And all changes and transition comes with progress, but also with great challenges and also even friction. So I think seeing hundreds of millions being lifted out of poverty is very impressive, but also some of the huge challenges of modernity that China is facing now, as we all are, coping with environmental changes, climate, but also nature, biodiversity and everything we have to deal with. And most of the world's climate and nature challenges are present in China. You have a huge vested interest in helping the world succeed, as have we. So that is also something
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us today again on this very innovative setup for this interview. Hopefully you're enjoying it, and thank you for your time and for sharing with us your very insightful perspectives.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
从绿色经济到经贸关系，从人工智能到全球治理，斯特勒首相在采访当中畅谈了对两国合作的愿景。他还表达了对中国历史的兴趣，对脱贫成就的肯定，以及通过这趟高铁旅程感受到了中国的现代化。他表示，期待两国以建交70周年为契机，开启合作更为紧密的下一个70年。感谢您收看本期的高端访谈，我是邹韵，我们下期再会。